Welcome to The World This Week, France 24's look back at the news of the past 7 days. And we're joined by Aaron Zaleski, Paris correspondent of the Daily Beast. This programme, of course, in conjunction with the Daily Beast. Dave Keating, France 24's Brussels correspondent, and Alexis Poulain of Le Monde Moderne. Greetings all. Now, we discussed earlier this week the politicisation of the COVID vaccines, how the jabs to stop the pandemic have become, in many ways, a geopolitical tool. The row between the EU and vaccine producer Astra Zeneca gathering pace, and the EU's getting all protectionist as well. Let's hear from Vladis Dombrovskis, who's the EU Commerce Chief.
The Commission has adopted an implementing regulation making the export of certain products subject to an export authorization. This regulation concerns the transparency and export of COVID-19 vaccines.
Let's go straight to our Brussels correspondent, Dave Keating. Dave, it's all reaching boiling point now.
Yeah, it really is. Essentially, this is what's going on. The Commission believes that AstraZeneca gave away doses that were intended for the EU, made in the EU, that they gave them away to the UK in the past weeks. The Commission says that under the contract they signed with AstraZeneca in exchange for 336 million euros of taxpayers' money to help develop that AstraZeneca vaccine. The company was supposed to have doses ready for right when the vaccine was approved by the EU. That happened today. But AstraZeneca then said, we can't deliver all the vaccines that we laid out in that delivery schedule. We can only deliver about a quarter of them. And so essentially, this is a mechanism that would allow the EU to stop the export of vaccines made here in the EU if the company making them has an undelivered commitment to deliver doses to the EU. It's an attempt to kind of claw back the doses that were given to the UK, if you will. I'm expecting a pretty firm pushback from the UK government on this, and then we could really get into what a lot of people are calling a vaccine war between the UK and the EU as each tries to vie to get as many vaccines as possible. It's exactly the situation that the EU was hoping to avoid with joint procurement, because as soon as you start getting into this area of vaccine nationalism and everybody just trying to grab as many vaccines for themselves as you can, you get into a really bad situation. So that's why all the EU countries banded together to buy vaccines jointly. You can imagine, you see this conflict happening between the UK and the EU right now. Just imagine if this conflict was happening between all 27 countries of the EU, if they were all scrambling to try to secure their own doses. That could still be possible if countries start breaking away from the joint procurement, but it's a bad situation and it's getting worse by the day.
Indeed, Dave, you paint a real picture there about how chaotic this could become. Erin, can I bring you in now? Hope you're okay. Good to see you. Aaron Zaleski from the Daily Beast. This all seems a far cry from the heady days when the vaccine was being first developed and there was talk from world leaders of, no one will be left out, vaccination for everybody. This is about the common good.
Yes, that's the ideally, but the reality has turned out to be quite a bit more complicated than that. And it is troubling. There were always, from the beginning, there were concerns about logistics. And now the situation has, I don't want to predict what's going to happen, but it is troubling to see the direction that it's gone.
It's really hard to predict, isn't it? I mean, it's when you hear of regions of France, Erin, postponing vaccinations because of shortages. I mean, basically, this wasn't how it was supposed to be, is it?
No. I mean, I think when the vaccine was first announced, it was really seen as this light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people. There was sort of this collective sigh of relief. Oh, okay, we're going to start vaccinating and things are going to bit by bit get back to normal. And I don't think anyone could have predicted how complicated this has become. It's really literally the worst time to have shortages. We have the development of these new variants. This is the time when the vaccines are needed more than ever. And yeah, it's not an ideal situation. It's quite troubling.
Indeed. Erin, thank you very much indeed. Let's just remind the viewers that this whole programme is being conducted at a distance because France is under a curfew. That curfew starts at 6 p.m. We're beyond that time now, so we can't actually bring people into the studio. Plus, socially distanced to reduce the possibility of COVID-19 infection. So we're playing the game and doing our best to make sure everyone's safe. Alexei, good to see you, sir. How are you? Keeping well, I hope.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. Good to see you. The vaccine chief, I'll call him, I'm not sure of his exact title, Alain Fischer, earlier on was saying that, if a Russian or Chinese vaccine is good, then why not use them? Do you think he's got a point when he says that, Alexei?
Of course, he's got a point. There's no politics in vaccination. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said that it should be a common good. This vaccine should actually be a common good of humanity. And we're far from this. What we see is that the big pharmas, the labs, the Pfizer of this world, have sold their products, but they haven't speed up their production capacities, especially in Europe. They knew that we were asking to have a lot of doses, millions of doses, but they haven't made the changes in their production lines to make sure that they could deliver. And now, for example, Pfizer has closed its factory in Brussels or in Belgium to make the work to make sure that they will deliver in the future, in March or in late February. It's unacceptable. And we can't see the contracts that the EU Commission has signed with the labs. The one that came up today was Astra Zeneca into the public. But what we see is not the full contract, because the price, the doses, and other information, key information, are blurred by the Commission. So what we have here is typical of what the farmers are doing most of their life, making money out of the states. They ask the states to provide funds to develop the vaccines, and now they want us to pay vaccines, and yet there is not enough doses. That is not acceptable. And I think government should be tougher with the private companies delivering these products, because we paid for these. And we made sure that, it's about health. It's not about profits or short-term profits. And so far what we've seen is very weak governments and very strong big pharmas dictating their laws to the people governing countries. And it's unacceptable, in my opinion.
Indeed. And all the time, people, at home watching this, or wherever they're watching this program from, will be wondering, when their vaccination is going to come. Alexei, it was Emmanuel Macron who said he wanted Sanofi to become, in France, French company, to become a kind of hub for creating vaccines. Then you hear that Sanofi is getting rid of 400, I think that might be an approximate number, but it's about 400 research jobs. Is it just me, or does that not quite add up as a kind of story?
Of course, it doesn't add up. I mean, Sanofi is just like the other labs. It's in it for the money. And they got rid of people doing the R&D. The process, especially that is costing a lot of money, is where you research and develop new products. And they prefer to get rid of people in France, yet they had some help from the French government, money helping because of the COVID and because of we have this impôt recherche, so research tax, and yet they are not playing the game. And what you see is that, of course, Sanofi is stopping the race to the vaccine, but trying to develop new medication. But the problem again is that governments are not tough enough with these companies. Yet they pay for these companies to sort of play a game of employment and things like that. So you can clearly see that the balance of power is in one direction, and it's finance, and it's clearly not global policies or national policies trying to have a national health policy.
Alexei, thank you very much indeed. Roll on with the jabs, because we're all going to need them. And let's hope we can sort out this problem as soon as we can. Let's move on to another story that we dealt with this week. The effect of the COVID lockdown being felt, of course, by everyone in France. Great concern over the mental health of students in higher education and over younger school pupils missing out on lessons and that essential social contact that shapes childhood and serves as a template for adult life. It is a situation that is very difficult. Erin, can I bring you in to start this one off? Clearly, going off to university, I've got one one child, my daughter, she's at university right now. My sons have been through. It's difficult enough when kids go to university. Maybe, if we're thinking back to our own past, we can remember that. But in these circumstances, it must be even, 10 times, 20 times more difficult.
No, I mean, I can't even imagine, as you said, going away to university is that it's exciting, but there's also enormous stress. There's enormous academic pressure, and the social contact, the social group helps relieve some of that. And it's so crucial for well-being. I mean, I would say for everyone, but particularly students, because in many ways, your life centers around the peer group, and you form very close bonds in universities. And then here we have, as I said before, there was this sense of relief that when the vaccines had been developed, and now that we have these new variants come in, there's this lingering sense of uncertainty. There's this sense of, when will this end? How much longer will we be isolated like this? What kind of future will I have? And when this does end, what will the economy look like? Will I be able to find employment? So, I mean, there's tremendous and understandable stress and anxiety among the students right now. I think that a recent study, I think I read in Le Monde, that indicates that student mental health has significantly deteriorated in the past year.
It is a massive concern. I mean, we discovered this week students obviously sort of feeling suicidal. It's no exaggeration to say that. And the things they were talking about, it kind of sums up and taps into exactly what you were saying, Aaron. Alexi, can I bring you in to sort of comment more on this one? I mean, clearly, if you are a student and you get a place at a prestigious university, or I'm thinking of one of the establishments in Paris, for instance, you might be looking to go in there, learning more, mixing with people who are like-minded and help you develop, and then suddenly you find yourself kind of stuck in the same four walls, a little box that you're living in. I mean, it must be a really difficult thing to get through.
It's very difficult, and we had a feature in Le Monde Moderne with a student from Tours explaining how hard it is because you're away from your family. You can't make new friends. It's your first year at university, and you live in a very small place. And if you see now, we have trouble with the students just trying to find food, and they go to Restaurant du Cœur and food banks like they never used to go. The good thing with the government is that it imposed 2 meals at €1 at the course at the restaurant at the university. So at least students can have cheap and affordable, well-balanced meals. But it's not enough. The problem is in the head, as you said, psychological threat to the students because of this COVID hold. It's something that is just the beginning, because they're in the age where they are making new friends, learning to become adults, and it's all stopped. And it's all very different to what we used to discover when we were at their place. And we have nothing to offer but some special help, financial help for psychological aid. But I don't think it's enough. I think there should be special measures for these young people, because it's going to be hard for them to study, but it's going to be hard for them to find jobs, work. The world after COVID will be very hard for the younger. And that's something that we have to envisage right now and make sure that we put in place the right policies for them and they are not sacrificed for the elderly.
No, I hear what you're saying completely, because I mean, it's the thing is that it's if you consider this now, if you look at, say, an ICU ward and you see people who are, fighting for their lives, it's easy to stand back and say, well, what have the students got to complain about? All they've got to do is basically stay in. But that doesn't begin to sort of really understand the isolation, the mental torment, the problems, and of course beyond that, Alexi, just to sort of keep on with you at this one. Beyond that, there's the dealing with the after COVID, isn't there? As you say, possibly no jobs, possibly no opportunities, and then carrying that mental weight with you. I mean, one can imagine that, there's going to be a massive need for behavioral psychologists, educational psychologists to help, young people through these kind of things.
Exactly, but we don't have enough of these people on the ground. So what you have is young students on their own, suicidal tendencies and suicide, people trying to already take their life. And it's something that is, again, about health. mental health. So, okay, we have COVID, it's a dangerous virus, but what we're doing to fight the virus might be another creating more health problem for the society. And it's something that it took about a year for people at the government to understand what they were doing and saying, oh, maybe we're not taking the right measure, or maybe we're taking the wrong measure, because what we're doing here is creating more problems. And what's going to happen after the virus is gone or is controlled by the vaccines or the medications? These young people will have to face a world with economic crisis, with environmental crisis, social crisis, and their own way of behaving will be changed forever by this COVID episode.
Indeed, Alexei, thank you very much indeed. Dave Keating, coming to you possibly for the final comment of this first part of The World This Week. Students queuing up for food banks, getting a €7 box of food, getting a €1 meal at a hall of residence, like a university canteen, which is great if they live there, but if they live 45 minutes away, obviously that's another complication. That's a situation in Paris. I imagine this is replicated where you are in Brussels.
Yeah, indeed. You know, I keep thinking lockdown is tough, but I'm pretty lucky where I am in my life and in terms of being able to work from home. I keep thinking, what if this had happened to me 20 years ago? I mean, this is supposed to be the best time of these kids' lives, and they're essentially losing a year out of that period, which is supposed to be about, you know, social interactions, growing as a person, making friends. It's tough, and this is really tough everywhere, of course, not just in France, but also here in Belgium or in the US, where I'm from. This is a period where I would just think that if you were a young person going through this period, it would be so bleak, because so much you're already kind of in a precarious situation in your life. When you're young all the time, you look toward the future and you see all of this debt that's being mounted to deal with the COVID crisis. Things just must look so bleak. And that's why the recovery funds that we have, both at national and EU level, really need to be focused on these young people, I think, and giving them some kind of hope, because it must be so bleak to be a 20-year-old in these times.
Indeed. My daughter's 20 on the 2nd of February. So there you go. You hit the nail for me right on the head. Thank you. Thanks to Dave. Thanks to Erin. Thanks to Alexei. That's part one of The World This Week. Stay with us. More to come in part two. Welcome back to The World This Week here on France 24. For part two, we have with us Erin Zaleski, Paris correspondent of The Daily Beast, with whom this programme is in partnership, Dave Keating, France 24's Brussels correspondent, and Mona El Tahawi, whose feminist giant newsletter is readily available online. Mona is a journalist and author, notably of the books Headscarves and Hymens and The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls. Thank you all for being with us. France has been in a state of collective questioning this week over the issue of incest in the wake of the book by Camille Kouchner detailing the sexual abuse of her twin brother during adolescence by their stepfather. One of the statistics that I have found this week, 1 in 10 people in France has experienced some kind of sex abuse or sexual harassment within the family. Shocking story, however you look at it, and shocking figures from the campaign group Face à l'Inceste, or Facing Up to Incest. Mona, can I bring you in first on this one? Most victims of this kind of crime tend to be girls. Most of the perpetrators tend to be adult males. There's no way you can say this. It's horrific what goes on, but there's really also a real power dynamic there, isn't there?
Absolutely. This is absolutely a crime committed by patriarchy. This is why I always like to tell people that as a feminist, I'm not fighting men, I'm fighting patriarchy. And patriarchy is a system of institutions that privileges male dominance. Now, some women can benefit from that and some men are hurt by that. And I think when it comes to sexual violence, it's really important to keep that power dynamic central, because that allows you to understand that this is about patriarchy. This is also, it's not a crime of, stranger danger, because I think a lot of the time people assume that women and children will be safer at home. So besides this terrible crime that we're discussing, it's also important to connect it to what's happening now during the pandemic, when we've seen a spike in violence against women and children during lockdown. So these are crimes committed by patriarchy.
Indeed. As you say, it's crimes committed within the home when children would hope, well, one would hope children are safe and cosseted from that kind of danger. But Erin, we're seeing in France, for instance, a real increase in calls to domestic violence lines, reports of domestic violence taken to the police. One of the problems with this particular horrific crime of incest is that people don't speak about it. And it's been one of these things that's popped up in this story relating to Camille Kouchner and her book that some people might have known and didn't say anything.
Yes, exactly. And we've seen this attitude in other the Metoo cases over the past several years in France. For instance, I reported last year on the affaire Gabriel Matzneff, the famous writer, and he was quite open about his preferences for underage teenagers. It wasn't really a big secret, and everybody sort of looked the other way. It was tolerated. In her book, one of his alleged victims, Vanessa Springora, in her book Consent, she wrote about her entanglement with Matzneff. I think she was 14 and he was 50, and her own mother was aware of it. So there's this sort of this culture of permissiveness that some of it dates back. There's theories that some of it dates back to the attitudes of the late 60s in France. The sort of the motto of everything it's forbidden to forbid, and I think that's part of the issue here.
Indeed, forbidden to forbid. France has no age of consent, or didn't have an age of consent until, well, it's a discussion that's still ongoing, isn't it? Would that at least, do you think, Erin, could state, well, draw a line in the sand which says, listen, if you go beyond that, you are really committing an offence here, regardless of whether someone says they wanted it or not?
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, again, the consent laws are a bit murkier in France than they are in some other countries. But I think that has the fact that these victims are coming forward, I think that is causing a shift in the attitudes. I know that Macron recently said that he was going to tighten laws to better protect children against sexual abusers, including sexual abusers within the family. So I think the attitudes are shifting finally, but it's been a long time coming.
Indeed. Mona, can I come back to you? This issue, and I think I'm kind of at risk of repeating myself here, but there's this sense of manipulation going on, isn't there? I mean, within the household, someone there who is, I'll use your word, the patriarch, manipulating things. This is really what's so insidious and fundamentally horrible about the whole thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is essentially an issue of consent. This is why the age of consent is important. This is why it's vital to ask, is this person able to say, yes, I want this. Yes, I enthusiastically consent. Because when you're talking about such vast age differences, such vast power dynamics, such an utter dependency of a child on an adult, regardless of what the relationship is, it's absolutely important, regardless of where in the world you are, to understand this. And I think this is why this quiet, this silence that we're discussing plays such an insidious role in this, because, children are so dependent on their parents, are so dependent on adults, that they can't imagine that at the same time, this person they're dependent on is someone who's hurting them, and that if they do go forward, that could eventually hurt this person that they're dependent on. So they're caught in this terrible cycle of dependency and also vulnerability. So ages of consent, power dynamics, and ultimately a really serious look at patriarchy, regardless of where in the world it is and what cultural values underpins it, is
Indeed.
absolutely essential.
I hear completely what you're saying, Mona. Dave Keating, your thoughts, sir?
Well, it's interesting when you look at the whole lockdown context. We did a report for France 24 here in Brussels about a hotel that's been turned into a shelter for battered women. And, you know, for a lot of us, home is a safe space, but for a lot of people, home is a dangerous space. It's an unsafe space. And at this time, we are forcing people to be in homes, and those homes are sometimes unsafe. And it was really interesting when you looked at the situation of some of these women here in Brussels who were trapped inside bad situations, and you know, normally under a normal circumstance, they could find ways to be away from this unsafe space, but now they're legally mandated to be inside that unsafe space unless they let the authorities know, and then the state can find some safe place for them to go. But that's so essential, I think, for governments to be looking at this. We've seen the statistics, we've seen that domestic abuse is becoming an increasingly big problem in these lockdowns. People are not just locked in at home, but they're frustrated, they're angry, they're upset. I think this is, especially if we look toward the next couple of months and this very dark winter we're looking at, this is going to be a problem that governments are really going to have to grapple with.
Indeed. Also, the attitude of the police, the authorities, the investigators, all these things have to change in many ways to enable people who suffer issues like incest, child sex abuse, domestic violence to feel confident enough to come forward and speak. It's essential they're supported. It's essential that it happens. Thank you, all three of you. Let's now move on to the situation in Egypt, marking the 10th anniversary of the revolution that overthrew, of course, President Hosni Mubarak. Hard to forget those amazing scenes in Tahrir Square that began on the 25th of January back in 2011. Mubarak's 30-year hardline reign brought down by ordinary people demonstrating under the slogan, bread, freedom and social justice. Well, today, with poverty and corruption still rife and another hardline leader in place, many are asking, well, what happened? Mona, can I bring you into comment first on this? Because I know this is all very close to you.
Just listening to the sounds of, the millions of people who fill Tahrir Square and other squares across Egypt gives me goosebumps, because our revolution was something that so many of us had dreamt of our entire lives, exactly for the reasons that you mentioned, because of the poverty, because of the corruption, because of the systemic torture under the Mubarak regime. And when I look back over the 10 years, I'm painfully aware that so many people in the media love to twist the Arab Spring into a winter, into the Arab winter and the failure. And for me as an Egyptian, yes, the regime has not fallen. Only one man fell. But so much has changed in Egypt that is not always obvious from the surface. So when I'm asked about the revolution, do I regret it? Absolutely not. It had to happen. And my answer to, well, what's gone wrong is that it continues. Revolutions are not a one-time event. Revolutions do not get resolved in 18 days. Revolutions are a fundamental unpacking and a reckoning. And I also insist revolutions dare us in the future to meet up to the challenge that they gave us. And this, I believe, we're still doing in Egypt.
Indeed. I hear what you're saying. So you're taking some positives. I could ask you, what are those positives that you're seeing? And at the same time, say to you, well, Hosni Mubarak was there. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is now in place. It's almost like for like, because some Egyptians have said to us that things are actually worse than they used to be.
I hear you, and I hear all of that. And my quick response is, we are talking about unarmed, ordinary people, like you said, who are fighting a military-backed regime that is armed to the teeth by the world's most powerful country, the United States. Donald Trump, who just left office, barely, used to call Abdel Fattah al-Sisi my favorite dictator. 5 US presidents used to prop up Hosni Mubarak's 30-year dictatorship. The EU, France, Macron just gave Sisi the Legion of Honor. So we're talking about Egyptians fighting not just our regime, but its very powerful allies. So yes, I recognize that regime remains. So what am I so positive about? Every time I get together with my family and we talk about an aunt who's got divorced, a cousin who's left Egypt to live the way that she wants to, a cousin who lives the way she wants to in Egypt, I always ask my parents, who are in their 70s, why do you think this happened? And their answer is always the revolution. The revolution taught us we can say no, and we are continuing to say no.
So the revolution is a continuous process. I hear what you're saying, and I completely agree with you. Without having your experience and your insight, I'm hearing what you're saying, and it sounds completely correct. Erin Celeste, can I bring you in for your thoughts, please?
Yeah, more of a question for Mona, because I remember during the demonstrations in Tahrir Square, it's sort of shown attention on sort of a dark element in Egyptian society, which was the sexual harassment and sexual assault that Egyptian women were faced with. There were also some Western journalists who were assaulted. And my question was, have you seen any? I know there was a sexual harassment law that was implemented a few years ago. Have you seen positive changes on that front, on the women's rights and protection for women against sexual harassment and assault?
Erin, great question. Can I just add to that before we let Mona answer it, that our own correspondent, Sonia Dridi, was a victim of the kind of abuse that you're talking about, Erin. So, Mona, over to you.
Yes, and so was I, because in November 2011, this wasn't during the actual 18 days, but later that year, and that's why I say the revolution continues. Egyptian riot police broke both my arms and sexually assaulted me, and I was threatened with gang rape, blindfolded, interrogated with 2 broken arms. So I'm very aware of those levels of sexual violence and harassment that happened. And, in answering that question, I'm so glad you asked me that. This is one of the most positive aspects of what has happened over the past 10 years, because when I look at Egypt today, there are unprecedented numbers of Egyptian women and girls and queer people who are speaking out against sexual violence. They're every day on social media in the same way that in the run-up to the 18 days 10 years ago, activists would use social media to fight back against the Mubarak regime and organize. Women, girls, and queer people are using social media to fight back against sexual violence. There have been several headline cases that have gone to court successfully, others not so successfully. But the fact that Egyptian women are saying, so-and-so raped me, or I was out on a date, or they spiked my drink, the actual fact that they're talking about sex and sexual violence so openly, again, is a reminder that the revolution taught us to say no to authority and to fight back against patriarchy. Again, patriarchy in all of its manifestations, including in public space and in the home.
Indeed. That, the ordeal that you went through, Mona, I think the fact that you are still so positive and speak so, there's a sense of love comes through, certainly about your country and about the people and about the changes that you want to see. I mean, it's remarkable from yourself that you still have that kind of positivity. It's a real credit to you. Dave, can I bring you in to sort of basically talk a little bit more about the aspect about, say, the allies, like the EU, maybe sort of like calling for one thing, but maybe the practice that the EU has towards, I mean, we've said it about China, we can say it about any other sphere in the world where the EU does business. But certainly there's no great pressure on Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to change from anyone in the EU, especially not from France.
Yeah, certainly not. I mean, Mona mentioned that Legion of Honor award to President Sisi. That really disgusted a lot of people across Europe. But we've seen that Western democracies have a very, very bad track record on this. They continually seem to place the importance of stability and their own interests over the human rights and human dignity of the people who live in some of these countries. And so we saw, after many, many years of Western countries propping up Mubarak, we saw the Arab Spring, and now we see Western countries propping up the same kinds of systems. It is not a good track record. I think that generally people in positions of power in the EU, in the United States, in UK, in Canada, they are sympathetic toward the Arab Spring, and they're sympathetic toward the problems of people on the ground in these countries. But at the end of the day, when they have to face the realpolitik decisions, for instance, President Macron's decision, do I try to curry favor with Egypt by awarding this medal, or do I not do that in order to protest the actions of the government? We saw the choice that was made here. I think oftentimes in these Western democracies, the temptation to try to look out for their own benefit and their own interests and ignore some of the abuses that take place in many of these types of governments, we see time and time again what they choose. It is disheartening.
Erin, are we expecting any change in US policy towards Egypt under the new administration, Joe Biden?
I don't want to be negative, but I don't see policy changing on any sort of fundamental level. I think he may be like outwardly less warm with al-Sisi than Trump was, for instance, but Egypt was and remains a really important U.S. ally. So I would be surprised if I saw any fundamental changes from the incoming administration.
Indeed, and when when I in the newsroom see the line about a stabilizing influence in the Middle East, I mean it's diplomatic speak. It's not taking into account how people are living, is it? And this is one of the I find this quite nauseating about our industry, that we end up sort of saying things like this when really we're not sort of taking into account how real people are and the impacts on their lives.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the negative impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the economy of, I would say, most, or if not all, Western countries. And I don't see the U.S. or its allies ready to, forgo or get rid of the lucrative arms deals that they have with Egypt.
Indeed. Well, there's money. There's usually, a whole lot of complicated things that go with it. And usually it's the small people who get crushed. Mona, your thoughts?
Well, the question about Joe Biden is interesting because exactly 10 years ago, Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. And he very infamously, because the video is there, was asked about Mubarak and if Mubarak was a dictator who should step down, because that's what we were calling for in Egypt. And Joe Biden refused to call Hosni Mubarak a dictator. So, again, this is an important reminder that 5 U.S. presidents, Republican and Democrat, propped up Hosni Mubarak's 30 years in power. So I don't have much hope for the Biden administration, whether it comes to Egypt or Saudi Arabia or any other dictatorships in the region, because Egypt is a major ally, because of the Camp David peace accords, because of migration, because of so many other things that, again, remind us that we, the people, are on the bottom of the list of considerations when it comes to these very powerful allies who prop up our dictators.
Can I give you the final word on this one, Mona? Given, it's your land we're talking about. What's your kind of abiding memory then of 2011? We're going to end with some music in a moment from that exact period, from an artist who really sort of like gave the impromptu soundtrack to what was going on. But what's your abiding memory? What do you retain?
Well, I'm going to guess that you're going to probably play Rami Assam, because he was the one who had so many millions of people, chanting leave to Mubarak and had so many beautiful and moving revolutionary songs. So my abiding memory is listening to ordinary people saying, this is my life we're talking about. This is the future of my children. This country belongs to me. This is my Egypt. And just, the goosebumps that I get just remembering the conversations between myself and my family and my friends. And then when I did go to Egypt and being on the front line of that protest, where we continued to risk our lives, months after those 18 days, I am convinced as an Egyptian that this revolution continues, because I am convinced as an Egyptian that we deserve to be free. And the challenge of the revolution is to remember how we felt when we knew we deserved to be free.
Mona Eldawi, thank you very much indeed. Yes, you have predicted precisely how we're going to end the programme. Well done. Dave Keating in Brussels, thank you. Aaron Zaleski as well, as ever. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks to Alexei Poulin for his contribution in part 1. Let's end this edition then with, as Mona correctly identified, the man who provided the impromptu soundtrack to Egypt's revolution, Rami Assam, playing and singing in Tahrir Square in 2011. Do stay with us.
قالك ايه قلة مندسة اضحكوا يا ثورة قالك ايه احنا بنخرب اضحكوا يا ثورة قالك ايه بناكل كنتاكي اضحكوا يا ثورة قالك ايه خدنا 200 يورو اضحكوا يا ثورة قالك